Welcome in, everybody, to the Nighttime Pod. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. Alongside me, as usual, Matthew Brecker, and the producer, the octopus, Justice Covert. Guys, we had an amazing week of college football, or at least one huge, monumental game, Georgia versus Alabama. We're going to do everything, talk about it all. Week 5 recap here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Guys, what were like some of the biggest takeaways that you had? I don't know. First thoughts before we get into the game of the week that was Alabama and Georgia.
Uh, I mean, that was game of the year, in my humble opinion. That game was so fun to watch. That was crazy. Crazy game.
Yeah, I was thrilled.
Yeah.
Obviously, hearing that was 14-0, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get my first game of the week pick right, and then it was 21-0, and then it was 30-7. Then I got home and I got a text from Patrick that kind of just said a holy expletive, and I was like, what happened? And I look, it's 34-33, but then Ryan Williams saved me, so we're good.
Yeah. Now, hey, I'm good too. Now we're tied, and someone has to wear the chicken hat next week.
Yeah, of course, we're doing that right whenever I lose the first time on nighttime. I was back and forth on that game for a minute there, and then I decided to go with Georgia. I kind of regret it because I also put it in a parlay too. I was sharp this week. I was sharp. I said Illinois is going to cover. We all said I think Colorado. That line was a little messy, and then I also had Oklahoma winning outright. So I was doing pretty good against the spread until I had Georgia money line. But yeah, let's get into the biggest takeaways of that game specifically. So Bama is now going to be the number 1 team in the country. Matthew, we'll start with you. Is that right? I don't know.
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about it during the game, if they deserve the number 1 spot. And I kind of, I know I said not really. I think it still belonged to Texas, but like thinking about the game, I think that they do because they showed resilience after things started falling apart for them in the second half. And I think they showed enough in the first half to prove that they are the best team in the league for right now, at least. I mean, Jalen Milroe, he might like be one of the first quarterbacks drafted in this year's draft. He's that guy. He proved that to me. I feel like he proved it to a lot of people. So yeah, I think that the number 1 spot. I mean, you take down Georgia. I think it's deserved. I do.
Yeah, I think the biggest game of the biggest win of the year so far out of everybody in the top 5 was made by Alabama. Even though Texas is still undefeated, they kind of faltered this week. So Alabama has the best resume going into the week. I will say Georgia dropping to 5 is tough for them, but since they have 1 loss and the top 4 teams don't, they kind of have to get subjugated to that spot. But Alabama's the best team, I think, after what they did to Georgia.
Yeah, honestly, Ohio State's getting a lot of love right now, and I get it. They've been taking care of business, but I would have almost put like Tennessee above them with their win over Oklahoma. And I do agree, Georgia going all the way down there is pretty tough to 5. They did beat Clemson. Clemson's looking pretty good right now, and we'll get into them a little bit later, but they're kind of taking care of business. They're looking like probably the clear-cut, at least, second team in the ACC, and Georgia really like wiped the floor with them. So I was surprised with that move. Kalen DeBoer gets his first win over Georgia, maybe first of many to come. Now, I'm just curious, like what you guys are thinking as far as the Heisman race, because you did say Jalen Milroe might be one of the top quarterbacks off the board. I think he could potentially be the Heisman frontrunner after that game. In my opinion, the race is pretty wide open. I would say he's got to be like the number 1, alongside maybe Genty from Boise State. I don't know who else exactly. Dart seems to have fallen a little bit. What do you think of Justice?
Travis Hunter.
Yeah,
yeah, well, he called it. He called it.
Yeah, that interception was pretty disgusting.
Did you guys feel like I felt like that was kind of like a little bit early? Not early for his Heisman case, but like I'd imagine he's going to have a bigger, more notable game at some point down the line, and he hit the Heisman buzz against UCF. Not even trying to dog on UCF right now, but just felt like could have had that Desmond Howard moment like later on in the year.
Yeah, it was a little weird to me because I mean, like, we're not like the biggest game on their schedule. It's like I don't know. I thought it was a little odd. But also I can't stand the guy until he becomes a Bronco.
Colorado, really. Yeah.
No, yeah. I'll like Travis Hunter when he becomes a Bronco.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. Well, where are they going to even be drafting? He's going to be taken in the top 5 of the NFL draft, right? So
Yeah, well, this
is
is,
the Broncos going to be there?
I thought they
probably.
were, but they won
Keep
yesterday.
winning
But
games.
we're not here to talk about NFL. We're not here to
There
talk
might be the most fraudulent 2-2 team maybe in the NFL, but we'll see.
Probably.
Okay, any last words on Alabama, Georgia?
I will say, if these teams play again, I'm not so sure Alabama takes it. And this was kind of something that was brought up afterwards, is that Georgia, they were kind of getting to Alabama there in the second half. They started figuring them out a lot. If it wasn't for Ryan Williams' spectacular play, Alabama wouldn't have come away with the victory. But I think this is where you finally see the dichotomy between Kalen DeBoer and Nick Saban. Like, you go through these first couple weeks, and Kalen DeBoer is checking off all the boxes for Alabama. But in the face of a win that was kind of a ugly win in some cases, how does he react to his team moving forward? Is he going to be complacent and just say, you know what, well, we still won. We were still 30-7. We still got the job done. Or is he going to find a way to test them so when they face off potentially against Georgia again, they don't falter? Yeah. And I feel like Nick Saban in this situation would be perfect for that. He'd be, a bit hard on them in order to make sure that doesn't happen.
I always felt like when you played a Nick Saban team for that second time around, no matter what happened, like, you were in for something that was going to be way different than that first game, or you had your work cut out for him. It almost felt like a death sentence. Do y'all remember, like, in 2011 when LSU won 9-6, game of the century, 1-2, and then they played in the national championship game, lost 21-0, didn't even get the ball past the 50-yard line till like midway through the fourth quarter. Like, that game was suffocating. Like, I always felt like if you played Nick Saban that second go round, you were done for. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I also will say I don't think that Alabama will win in the second matchup against Georgia. I just felt like with Carson Beck's mistakes specifically, it was just a mess of a first quarter. And that first half, that could have got really, really, it did get really bad. They could have rolled over, and they didn't. That was super impressive, in my opinion, for them to come all the way back. There's NFL talent, obviously, on both sides of the ball. But when you say that, I don't really see any NFL teams making that sort of comeback, right? That is super rare. And when we do see it, I think we usually kind of give the props to that team that's coming back. So I feel like, as much as people are saying Alabama's that number one team in the country, which rightfully so, I'm saying that they should be ranked as such, I think we got to recognize Georgia came back and, as you could see, made a ton of mistakes, even on the way there. It wasn't even like a linear progression to catching up to Bama. So I feel like that is definitely something that should be noted, especially when we look at a rematch that I think has a probably over 50% chance of happening.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. This could very much be their SEC champion. I still think it's gonna be Alabama, Texas, truthfully. But yeah, it's gonna be fun to see. Like we've been saying, Carson Beck, he had a pretty gross game. Turnover wise, it was pretty rough. But yeah, we'll just have to see how he bounces back.
Yeah, I'm actually honestly,
Georgia, they did this comeback in large part, on the road. So you go to Bryant-Denny Stadium and you're down 37 at halftime. You don't imagine that they're going to have the lead at any point, for the remainder of the game. And that is going to be a big factor when they play each other again in the SEC championship. They aren't going to be in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So kind of I guess you could say neutral territory in Atlanta, but, that's going to help Georgia a lot in that sense.
All right, well, moving into the ACC now. Okay, so Miami just barely escaped against Virginia Tech. Was that a completion? Was that a completed Hail Mary or not? And Clemson now just took care of business again. They're dropping about 55 points per game. That's a stat since the Georgia game per Justice Covert. Who is better off in the ACC? Last week we were buying and selling the teams. What do you think, Matthew?
I know I talked a lot about Miami last week, and I'm still riding with them. That was a tough game from Cam Ward. But in that tough game, he still put on a pretty great performance there. Was it a Hail Mary? Was it not? We'll be talking about that for a long time. To me, it kind of looked like it. But you never can tell, I suppose, according to these refs. Now, Clemson, I think that they have a tougher.
Say something, Matthew?
I wasn't there. I don't know where this bit's going. I'm gonna finish. What I was saying. Clemson, I think that they have uh, well, actually, I'm looking at their schedule now, and I think that they have a pretty solid schedule for them. But I think Cam Ward is like a Heisman frontrunner, truthfully, and I don't know. I'm putting my money on Miami.
I'm a big fan of Louisville. I said that last week. They dropped one to Notre Dame this past week, which ruined my parlay completely. But
Yeah.
Louisville and Clemson, I think, are the true front runners of the ACC, and they're just going to be both targeting Miami. Miami's got a big target on the back, but I think Clemson and Louisville are gunning for it.
Wait.
You
Okay.
don't think
They're the
Miami-
front runners to like be that team that plays Miami.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
No, it's not
I
going to
think
be
me
Louisville.
and
against
Matthew
Clemson.
both initially thought for a second there
No.
that you said that they were the front runners.
Yeah, I was about
period.
to say.
And I was,
No.
I mean, even then, because I've sold Miami now. This is going to be my second straight week of selling Miami. I was like, whoa, that's a little too far. I tried to tell you about Louisville, man. I tried to tell you. I said Notre Dame's coming out. They got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, man. They're coming. They're coming. We're going to talk about them just a second.
Who's coming more, Clemson or Notre Dame? Who's on the up and up?
I think they're both in a pretty good spot. I'd have to. Who else is on Clemson's schedule? Because I know Notre Dame doesn't have anybody else on their schedule.
I think Clemson.
So, yeah, I would have to say Clemson. I'm looking at their schedule right now. This is pretty rough.
Clemson
They
didn't
obviously
lose to
took a
Northern
Super Bowl.
Illinois. No offense, Patrick Previty. Clemson didn't lose to Northern Illinois.
I can say Notre Dame here.
That's
I mean,
real.
that was a big win against Louisville. Although Louisville just dropped 6 points.
No, it was. It definitely was.
I mean, yeah, no. The Northern Illinois loss sucks. They also lost this week again. Also, by the way, so they're like, I think they're 2-2 or something like that now.
That was an anomaly.
Yeah, it was one of those weeks, I guess. I mean, they would obviously benefit a lot if like Northern Illinois were to like run the table. Then I think a lot of people would be like, oh, whatever. But I think for the most part, I like Clemson. And also, Cade Klubnik, a low-key Heisman guy.
No.
Low-key Heisman.
Really?
Low-key Heisman. If he torches the rest of the ACC and wins the ACC, I could see him getting a call going to New York.
No.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, look, he's played Appalachian State, NC State, Stanford after that Georgia game. Like, I'm not saying these teams are, you can walk over these guys, but, Clemson won a natty like how many years ago? Clemson isn't a bad team, but these are games they're supposed to win. Rest of the way, I think it's going to be a little tougher for them. So that's why I am choosing Miami over them. I just need to see a little more, just a little bit.
That's fair. And Georgia, I think, like you said, we got to recognize that Georgia, that was an NFL team out there last Saturday against another NFL team, and Clemson is not an NFL team. So 34-3 was that final score. That was not even close at all. So like the entire team for Clemson was outmatched. But okay, let's move into another ACC game that happened this week. Kentucky upset Ole Miss. First thoughts, still buying into all of those SEC teams in the playoffs? What do we think about Ole Miss?
I didn't really get on the hype train at the beginning of the year, and this game just kind of proved it to me a little bit. I was kind of shocked they lost to Kentucky. Actually, I mean, Kentucky's kind of been putting together some, pretty all right performances. I don't really believe in Jackson. Yeah, I don't really believe in Jackson Dart a whole bunch. And then, when I'm looking for a quarterback, I'm looking for like a leadership guy. I'm looking for a man who's going to lead you to war, right? You get out there and you tell your running back, hey, go down, get injured, pretend. That's not a leader to me. Not a leader, not a guy. And I mean, this defense creating pressure, I'm not saying, Kentucky to the playoffs or anything, but all I'm saying is last week I did sell on, there's no way there's going to be 5 SEC teams in the college football playoffs, because as we're going further into the season, I mean, they're going to play each other, and, upsets do happen. It's the SEC. There's a reason Kentucky's in the SEC. They aren't top dogs in the SEC, but there's a reason they're there. So I definitely believe that, like, at some point, some of these teams in the, college football playoff talk right now they could start eating each other out of a spot.
Yeah, referring back to that line where we said 5 teams, I still like the line a lot. But now that you're looking at, you have the top 4 teams, top 5 teams, 4 of them are in the SEC. Then you have Missouri at the 9 spot, who actually went up a spot in a bye week. I don't really think Missouri makes the college football playoffs. I think they're going to drop their next game against Texas A&M at Kyle Field. We already kind of pointed that out last week. But yeah, I feel like Ole Miss and really the SEC as a whole is so competitive that it doesn't matter if they're a ranked team or not when you're going into it. And we saw this with Auburn and Oklahoma, with Oklahoma's first, second SEC contest against Auburn. They almost drop it to a team that can't do anything offensively. Auburn led the nation in turnovers. Oklahoma led the league in takeaways when they met each other, and yet it came down to the wire. So this is something where it's a toss-up every week when these SEC teams go against each other.
Yeah, right now, if I'm looking at the teams that are on the bubble, so outside of Alabama, Texas, and Georgia, I think all 3 of those teams, unless disaster strikes for any of them, are probably going to make the playoffs. They're going to be the teams that get in over the other teams if they have the same record, all that sort of stuff, favorites to potentially make it to the SEC championship game. When I take a look at the bubble, the teams outside of that group, Missouri, Ole Miss, LSU. Now, let me know if I'm forgetting anybody. Missouri, Ole Miss, LSU, Oklahoma, and I'm going to throw Texas A&M in there because they're ranked tied with UNLV at 25. I don't know exactly who I like the most out of that bunch, but I will say that Ole Miss and Oklahoma might be those teams. So I can't exactly.
I like Oklahoma a lot.
Yeah, I like Oklahoma a lot if their quarterback situation is fixed. What I don't like about Oklahoma is the end of the season schedule that they have, where it's Mizzou, Alabama, LSU in the front of 3 games, and then they obviously got to beat Texas still and Ole Miss. They got 5 seriously hard-ranked games left on their schedule out of the next 7 games. What was the face for, Justice?
But, that's almost a good thing for them, because if they go in and they win 4 of those, or heck, even run the table, they're locked in for the college football playoff. So it's almost better in this situation to have that in a tough conference like this. Because like we said, the top 4 teams in the 4 teams in the top 5 in the SEC, they're good enough as is, as long as they don't drop to anybody against themselves in those the rest of their schedule. They're going to be in the college football playoff. So to make a name for yourself, you kind of need to build the resume, and that's just a good spot for them to do that.
Yeah. You got to stack up big wins for sure.
I think they're good, and I just don't. They struggled against Auburn, and Auburn's got a lot to figure out right now. Now they were underdogs, so they went in on the road, and they beat Auburn. Well, that's impressive, just as is, because changing quarterbacks, bouncing back from the Tennessee loss, there was like a lot there to like about Oklahoma. But I will say, even though I do put them in that group of, they're with Ole Miss as far as they can sneak in. Those could be the other SEC teams in. I'm still not exactly going to bet any money on Oklahoma. So I'm going to have to slow up a little bit. I still think if Ole Miss and Oklahoma played today, I'd give the nod to Ole Miss personally.
I would say Oklahoma, just because they just proved that they can handle adversity better than Ole Miss could.
I think Kentucky's a good team. They somehow were able to inch out that win against Ole Miss. Yeah, they did. Yeah. They did play Georgia really, really tough. So we'll have to wait and see. I will say the SEC though, right now, I could see them beating up on each other, and a team like Notre Dame, like a 1-loss Notre Dame, sneaking in past a few of them. I could legitimately see like the loser of an ACC championship game. If let's say it's Clemson and Miami, and Miami's undefeated, they lose. I could see them still getting in. I think that's almost pretty obvious over any of those 2-loss SEC teams. I think right now it's looking like the SEC is definitely, because I'm assuming that Missouri's going to lose one of these games or one of these gimmies. Their Texas A&M game this week. I'm assuming one of those things is going to happen, in all honesty, and I could see another team kind of inching in. And then we haven't even talked about Big Ten football yet, which we're going to get into actually right now. Okay, Michigan's current strategy. They're inching out wins almost in the same fashion as Georgia was against Kentucky. And then all of these other close calls that we've talked about on Nighttime this entire year. Michigan's been at the forefront of that. They almost blew their lead against Minnesota. Are they going to keep it up? Matthew.
Yeah. No. And I'll tell you why. This is not an offense that's going to go out there and score like more than 30, 35 points. Like somewhere around that range, I feel like that's just not happening. I was looking at the stats earlier today. I think Davis Warren, yeah, he's still under like 600 yards on the season, or maybe 700. Their aerial attack is nothing. Alex Orji, I mean, he can't get anything going. And then you try, rushing the ball. They have a pretty okay rushing attack, but they're making their defense basically be their offense, and, hey, like I always say, defense wins championships, but they're going to get into some tough games. So if they really want to go far this year, I mean, they have to put up points. And to me, I'm just not seeing it right now. So I don't think it's going to work out for them in the end.
Yeah, Michigan won. It was a bit iffy, though. The offsides call on the onside kick was probably not the right call, and Michigan kind of escaped with a win. But the
second worst call of the week.
Yeah.
Second worst call. Yeah, and that's saying something because those are two pretty bad calls. The problem, though, is that they're relying too much on those big runs. And that's great and all.
Mhm.
Love the big runs. Love to see what Donovan Edwards and company are doing in the running back room. But it's not sustainable. You're not going to win game in and game out off of just having these 20-yard, 30-yard rips. But to that point, they can't drive down the field because they can't pass. Orji cannot pass the ball at a consistent level from what we've seen. Here's a stat.
Yeah.
17 passes were made at 20-plus yards by Carson Beck in the second half against Alabama. That's big because that's how they were able to come back against one of the best defenses in the country. That was the most in the Kirby Smart era at Georgia. Orji had 12 passing attempts against USC and then had 18 passing attempts against Minnesota in the entire games. You have one side of it where they are requiring the quarterback to throw 17 passes of 20-plus more yards just to stay in it against one of the best teams in the country. And on the flip side, in Michigan, you have their quarterback who's routinely now throwing less than 20 passing attempts of any yardage in entire games. So that's something when they go up against these top 5 teams, they're just not going to be able to compete like what happened against Texas.
Yeah, I agree. When they go up against any team that is, in my opinion, vying for the playoffs, like their true colors kind of show. And that's honestly why I was so disappointed in the way that USC handled that game. If USC hadn't gotten down in that game and they were able to kind of get a touchdown lead earlier on Michigan at some point before the late minutes of the fourth quarter, I honestly think Michigan would have just fallen apart. And they obviously had that huge run at the very end of the game that set up the game-winning touchdown. If they don't have that, I don't think they can make it down the field on USC. They showed, truthfully, after a while there, that they could not move the ball against USC. They went cold just as USC was cold at some point in the first half. Now, the defense is really good. The pass rush is there. Michigan has guys on their team, and they've got experienced coaches, at least on the staff, that are kind of around and have been around the program for some time. But when they have to go off script or they're playing from behind, I think that they're just a team that's not going to be able to hang with any of the top teams in the nation. I'm waiting for that Ohio State game. If Ryan Day leads Ohio State to an L in that game, that is going to be a tough week. And Ohio State might still just make the playoffs even after that. Or they might still make the Big Ten championship game after that. But that is going to be a time to see if they don't beat Michigan this year.
Yeah.
I guess we're all in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Ohio State.
That sounds like a doomsday scenario for the committee.
Yeah.
I don't know what they would have to do in a situation like that. I think it'd be very dependent on how Oregon's playing up until that point. If Oregon doesn't falter like they were at the beginning of the year and they come in and they're dominant and they end up going to the Big Ten championship and beat Michigan, if Michigan beats Ohio State in that situation, I wouldn't even know how they would handle that, because Ohio State might legitimately, I don't know.
Well, I don't even know if Michigan's going to be in a good spot or good enough spot to make the playoffs as far as their record is concerned. They got Illinois and Indiana on the schedule on top of Oregon, Ohio State, as I mentioned, and even a team like Michigan State. So we'll see exactly what ends up happening with any of those games. I think they dropped Illinois or Indiana. I think they dropped one of the two. So I don't know exactly if I'm buying into either of those teams. I know Indiana's leading an amazing, like, world-changing charge right now, as they're 5-0 for the first time since, I believe, like 1967 or something like that, something crazy. But I think they dropped one of those games. All right, here's a fun question. Jeremiah Smith or Ryan Williams, which one is the better freshman phenom receiver?
World on the line, game on the line, laser beam pointing at the earth. I want Ryan Williams. This dude is crazy. He dominated against Georgia as a 17-year-old wide receiver. Like, he's amazing, and I'll glaze him. I was glazing him in week 1. He had 2 catches for 2 touchdowns, 139 yards. Like, that's some Randy Moss type stuff. This was definitely his breakout game. 177 for a touchdown. His game winner for Alabama, I'm pretty sure I was like live texting you guys during the ending.
Yeah.
But that, like, the level of control he showed on that catch to, like, come down with the ball, instantly spin move, and, like, stay on his feet towards the sideline, like, that's next level stuff. I know he's just a freshman, but, like, he will be a first-round pick in the next couple years. I would take him any day of the week.
Yeah, I love Jeremiah Smith a lot. I saw, some clips that he was doing, a lot of one-hand catches, a lot of disgusting catches he was making against Michigan State. And 6 touchdowns in his first 5 games. But this Ryan Williams, man, he is something special. He seemingly is just in the right place at the right time so often, and it's just so consistent. It's similar to what, like, Travis Hunter was like in Jackson State, where it's like you throw the ball up to him and he's just going to make the catch no matter who's going up against. But yeah, 17 years old. A couple years ago, he's a sophomore in high school. I mean, he was the best player in the state during the high school for his whole career. But he's taking classes in, like, trigonometry or whatever, and now he's catching touchdowns in Tuscaloosa. It's unbelievable.
Like 13 when COVID happened.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Unbelievable.
It's just crazy to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, when does he turn 18? We're gonna hear this just like we heard Jason Tatum is 19 for the longest. Like, that's always in comment sections. People think it's funny still, but I don't think it's funny. The most unfunny place in sports is the comment section on Instagram of ESPN's posts and stuff like that. But we're gonna be hearing about how he's 17 for the longest. I wonder when his birthday is. If either of you guys can find that.
I just looked it up.
Okay.
February 9th, 2007.
February 9th? Whoa. So, okay, we're going to hear this for the entire season. He's going to be 18 next year.
He left high school early to play football at Alabama.
I thought he was just a young, like, in it for his grade.
Yeah. He left it early year.
And I feel like we don't really see that with position players. I feel like we only really see that with QB.
Championship.
He's that guy. And it's not like he's just showing up as a backup in terms of a medical emergency. He's winning games for Alabama.
Yeah. I mean, they said a little bit on the game, like Jalen Milroe just saw this guy play and kept playing with this dude. And he was like, you need to promote him from third team to second team. Keeps playing. You need to promote him second team, first team. This guy needs to be my first option. Like, he definitely worked for it, like, it's just insane to me that he's the number 1 option on an SEC team right now.
But that Jeremiah Smith is good, though. I
was about to give Jeremiah Smith his flowers.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
he deserves them too.
If Ryan Williams didn't make that play against Georgia this week, Jeremiah Smith would have had the play of the week.
I don't know. Brian Williams made a catch earlier in the Georgia game too. That was pretty insane.
I mean, he did. I'm just trying to say, Jeremiah Smith. Both these guys are going to be attached at the hip until they go to the NFL in 2 years after this year when they're first eligible, and they're both going to be first-round picks, barring injury, anything like that. Knock on wood. Mm-hmm. Those are the 2 guys right now. It's so impressive what they're doing. We've seen freshman wide receivers, but just the way that they're doing it on the programs that they're doing it for is it's just so impressive. So hopefully nothing happens as far as like NIL or, injuries that take away like their greatness from the college game.
And it's frustrating too. I bet for scouts and even GMs that, last year, I remember it's like Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Romo Doomsday, Brian Thomas Jr. You're like, in any other draft without Marvin Harrison, these guys would be the first wide receiver off the board.
Yeah.
Now it's like, well, with these guys coming up, maybe that wouldn't have even been the case.
Oh yeah, exactly. Right. These guys, they're so good. I mean, everybody's going to have that. I feel like in every class we kind of have it, or we see it every other class where there's a player that's so great, but there's also just another generational player right in front of him. And you're just like, man, this guy could be it, but it just depends. All right. Well, we are a show based in UCF, and we have waited this long. We've mentioned Travis Hunter a little bit, Shadir Sanders, and a little bit of the betting line from that Colorado UCF game. Did UCF fail, or was Colorado just better in their win over UCF?
Would it be wrong to say a little bit of both? I mean, truthfully,
it'd be a cop-out answer, sure, but you can go on.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, then you answer first. No. I think UCF did fail. I mean, I talked about it coming into the game on the last episode. Colorado is not a good unit against rushing attacks. And for RJ Harvey, I mean, this was the first game he was truly not like stifled. He still had that huge touchdown where he beat out Travis Hunter. But it just felt like nothing we could do could get started. And, we had to pass the ball, and that wasn't a good thing. We kind of talked about Michigan. I think, a little, less of a, problem like that. But I don't know if we're a team that we can pass the ball in comeback situations. And, it showed. I think that this was a wake-up call, and I hate saying it, but I don't know if RJ Harvey, I don't know if he's leading that Heisman race like I wanted him to, like I kept saying he is. It might be Shadover. Oh wait. Shadover.
There's a sign. Big noon
There's
kickoff
a sign.
Big noon kickoff sign.
That was fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad UCF did double their sack total of the year in this game. They had one through the first 4 weeks, and now they got two in this game against Sanders. So they did kind of take advantage of the Colorado offensive line's failures. But no, I mean, we already knew Travis Hunter and Shadur Sanders were going to have a great game. It was just a matter of getting to Sanders and disrupting him, and we just didn't do that, so it wasn't going to happen. KJ Jefferson, I mean, like against TCU, you started thinking that maybe it was going to start to click, maybe it would start to happen, but he still has those struggles that we saw against New Hampshire in the first half, and it's just not clicking the way you want it to. I will say though, Colorado, this isn't just because UCF blew it. I don't know why they were 14-point favorites, 15-point favorites in some situations. Colorado, I think honestly, you can make the case that they might be Big 12 favorites moving on. This shifted a lot of stuff in the conference, in my opinion, unless you're looking toward Kansas State, who just got a big win against Oklahoma State, or a Utah team that desperately needs Cam Rising. I think Colorado is the most complete team moving forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, both of those teams have one loss. So like you said, like the Big 12, it looks like it's pretty wide open. I'm less on board about Colorado being the favorites in the Big 12. And to answer the original question, I'm more so leaning towards UCF failed, but I do think that expectations were a little too high. Prior to the game, we all agreed that line was too big. And I was even surprised that they were potentially even favored. And it was because we have watched this team through the first 3 weeks, and we said where they struggled, they're going to have to improve within the week of practice leading up to Colorado if they really want to win this game. The pass rush was not there against Colorado. That is Colorado's biggest Achilles heel. It is their offensive line, and they got zero pass rush. Then we said KJ Jefferson needs to be efficient, and he needs to be able to push the ball downfield. We saw that against TCU. We unfortunately, and almost doesn't make any logical sense, didn't see that in the first 2 games. Despite playing an FCS team and Sam Houston, who's just joined the FBS last year. Yeah. And he wasn't able to do it. He had 3 total turnovers, 2 interceptions, and one of his touchdowns was to RJ Harvey, who took it to the house 70-plus yards. So you kind of give RJ Harvey the credit for that. We saw those 2 things. And then, and then we have, hey, we need our corners, our secondaries to hold up. And couldn't really do that either. All 3 of those were just really poor across the board, and I think we knew that going in. And so I want to say that expectations for UCF was just a little too high. Felt like with Big Noon Kickoff coming in, there was some buzz about UCF receiving a couple of votes. Oh, this the UCF team of old, one of the better group of 5 teams now in the Big 12, finally making noise, second year in the conference. Are they going to be one of the teams that makes it? We talked about it on Nighttime. We said, hey, this team's got the best percentage to make the college football playoff, or it's 35% to make the CFP. I think there was a lot of people, especially in the media, ready to crown this team. It was just a little too early. And I think we now see at the forefront some of the really glaring weaknesses of this team. They're going to have to figure it out. But I will say, in my final little argument here for my spiel, KJ Jefferson, that's an issue. That needs to get figured out. That was really scary. I didn't think he played well. Also, I have to mention it because we talked about it in pre-production. Second heaviest quarterback in college football behind DJU. I thought that was very interesting. I think he's like 247 listed. So I don't know if that's going to be the reason why, but there's some things that need to get figured out. He's not the guy that was advertised coming in from Arkansas.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's not first in terms of heaviest quarterback in college football.
That's a tough dig. That's a tough dig. All right. Any final closing thoughts about the UCF loss?
I think, it's a wake up call, and it's the fact that we couldn't create any pressure. Well, I mean, 2 sacks, whatever. It might just be a long season for our defense. I will say, Deshaun Pace, I thought he had a good game. I forgot to highlight him in last week's episode. I thought he was going to play a huge role in shutting down the middle. He got a pick. It's just sad that the rest of the defense didn't really step up.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm thinking Florida this upcoming week is a must-win game. Objectively, if you look at that and we lose that game, you'll look at the season as a total, and we only have 2 wins in the first 2 weeks that were kind of gimmies, and then we barely win against TCU with that comeback, and then Colorado, we get blown out. If we lose to Florida, not looking good for Gus Malzahn as a whole, really. So I think that's a must-win for UCF coming up.
I think the local feeling of the fans that go here, go to the school, the local media, if we lose next week, that brings UCF to 3-2. That brings Florida to 3-2. There has been a lot of media attention about Billy Napier getting fired. I'm not saying Gus Malzahn is going to be in that boat. So I don't think so. But Florida being 3-2 and getting all this hate, this vitriol from the media, and UCF sitting at 3-2, find it very interesting how the narrative will change a little bit around the team, because at least UCF fans have been able to say, hey, Miami's up here, Miami's over there, whatever. We're not paying attention to Miami, but we're better than Florida. We're better than UCF. The line opened -1 Florida. It's now at -2.5 Florida. Going on the road into the swamp, things could get ugly. Things could get is a little dangerous. I still say I like UCF here. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah,
I think let's not get too carried away. It was a poor game, but you can run the ball, and that's what you need, at least on the road. Classic football right there. We need to use the running backs a little bit more, too. I felt like the other running backs with RJ Harvey is something that we need to use more. But that Florida game should be interesting, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, looks like that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you, guys. Everybody watching Nighttime Pod. This is the first official episode of the Nighttime Pod. Last week was the Hurricane special. This first time. We'll be doing this every single Monday, but catch us on Thursdays, or actually on Fridays, for the actual Nighttime episode every week. But that's all for today. Thank you guys for watching.